Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we got another news video to discuss. We got a couple of signings to talk about, we got some waiver updates, some injury updates, we got suspension to talk about, and we got some trade rumors to discuss involving teams like the Buffalo Sabres, Ottawa Senators, Nashville Predators, Calgary Flames, and Minnesota Wild. And we'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Talk channel. Before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never been able to do with all of you guys, so don't forget to subscribe so we can hit 250 subscribers. Now, as usual, I'm going to start today's video off by discussing a couple of signings that have happened over the past couple of days. We've had two signings over the past few days, and both are pretty decent signings. First, we know Pinto was suspended 41 games earlier in the season. We know it was a really big scandal that happened, but his suspension is nearing an end. He's eligible to play, not today, but tomorrow against the Philadelphia Flyers, and with that in mind, Pinto has indeed signed a new contract. So with him being able to play tomorrow, he's now signed a one-year deal with an AAV of $775,000. Now, when this deal got done, there was a lot of talk by Friedman that said that they were also working on trying to get a long-term extension, which he's eligible to sign right now. So they're trying to get Pinto on a longer-term deal to try and keep him in Ottawa, but for the time being, he signed his one-year deal just around league minimum, and it's not too surprising. Pinto last year had 20 goals, 15 assists, and 35 points in 82 games. It was a solid first full season there for Pinto, who had a really good season. So far, he's had 43 points in 99 career NHL games, so when he gets into his next game, it'll be career game number 100, so that's very fantastic news for Pinto. Not overly surprised he signed a one-year league minimum deal. There was a lot of talk that he would probably sign somewhere around their league minimum to qualifying offer. He does wind up signing league minimum, which does help the Ottawa Senators cap situation, but there is a lot of talk that they'll try and sign him to a longer-term extension in the not-distant future. So this is a really good deal in my opinion for Pinto. He's missed the first 41 games due to suspension, so it's not too surprising that he took a little bit of a lower cap hit to get back into game action, and he's going to be eligible to play as soon as Philadelphia on Sunday, so that's really good stuff there for the Ottawa Senators. And I'm not really surprised they resigned for that little bit of a cap hit, so it's really good how it was cap hit. That's really good for Pinto to get back into game action, and hopefully they're able to work out a new contract extension. My guess will be like a 3 or 5 year deal between like $3 and $4 million with the AAV, so that would be a pretty decent long-term deal for the Senators and Pinto. So it will be a really interesting situation to watch out for, but Pinto's now signed. He's eligible to return tomorrow, and expect him to probably get back into game action not just in future, and maybe even sign a new longer-term contract extension also not just in the future. And then we also saw one more signing, which was a contract extension. Protas, who was a 2019 third-round pick, sort of been able to get into a lot of game action over the past little while for the Washington Capitals. Really carved himself out a pretty good role in the middle six this year for the Washington Capitals. He signed a 5-year contract extension with an AAV of $3.375 million, and the deal will be in the start of next year. So this was a really big contract extension. Protas, I think, was either coming off of his ELC or a really league minimum deal after that, so he was coming off of a really low-end deal. So to see him go from that sort of almost league minimum deal to $3.375 million AAV is pretty big of a jump. Protas, I don't think, has had that much of growth yet. I think this is something where the Caps are hoping that he can grow even more. So far, he's had 3 full seasons at the NHL level. 3 years ago, he was able to get into part of the NHL season, putting up 3 goals, 6 assists, 9 points in 33 games. Looked like he had potential. Last year, he played 58 games, putting up 4 goals, 11 assists, and 15 points, which is a solid point total. But this year, he's played in basically all the Capitals games. He's only missed a couple. He's playing 42 games so far this year. Already have 3 goals, 15 assists, and 18 points. So he's already smushed last year's point total record in 16 less games. So Protas looks like a fantastic player. Now, is it worth $3.375? That's a little bit of a stretch at this point in time. I would say it's probably worth like a maybe $2.5 million. $3.375 is a little bit of a stretch, and I think that could wind up working out not in the Capitals' favor. But if Protas is able to grow like he has over the past couple of years, and eventually be able to become like a 30 to 40 point player playing in the middle six, that could actually be a really good deal for the Washington Capitals. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. But Protas gets a long-term 5 years, $3.375 million contract. He's going to be a member of the Washington Capitals over the next little while, and I think this is a really good deal for them. Capitals were able to get a solid young player locked up for the long term. Is it a little bit much? I think it is a little bit much at this point in time, but if he's able to continue to grow, I think he'll be a fantastic addition for the Washington Capitals. So really good stuff there for the Caps to get one of their younger players locked up. Like I say, he's done really well this year. He's improved in his game. His point totals have gone up since last year, and he looks like a very fantastic player. And like I said, if he is able to continue to grow into like a 30 to 40 point player, this deal could wind up looking really, really good for the Capitals. But if he continues to only be like a 20, 25 point player and is being paid over $3.25 million, I think there would be some possible regrets from the Washington Capitals. So it'll be interesting to see. But the Capitals do sign Alexei Protas, and he's going to be remaining in Washington for the next little while. So it's going to be interesting to see there. Then we go over to the waiver update part of the video. The Flames, like we said over the last video, they placed Walker Duehr on waivers. We thought there was a decent chance he could get claimed, given the fact he's a good young bomb six forward who has some scoring potential. He didn't indeed clear. I'm a little bit surprised there. Duehr's a really good bomb six forward. Like I said, he's on the younger side of things, so I thought there would have been a couple of teams out there who would have wanted to take a chance on him. But instead, he's a guy who clears waivers. So not overly surprised that happened. He's a decent bomb six forward, but he's also, like we said, a bomb six forward. He might not be a lot of upgrade for a lot of teams, so he winds up clearing. Not overly shocked, but I thought there would have been a team or two out there who would have taken a chance on him. So with that in mind, that's a decent placement of the waivers for the Flames. We're able to get Walker Duehr to the minors. And then we also saw one more interesting waiver update be placed on Thursday, and that was that Spencer Martin of the Columbus Blue Jackets, who they claimed off of waivers at the beginning of the season, was indeed placed on waivers for Columbus Blue Jackets. He was supposed to be sent down. There was a very good chance that with the way he's played this year, given the fact that he has been basically a really good backup for either Tarasov or Merzlikins the entirety of the season. I don't think it's overly surprising that he would wind up being claimed, and he did get claimed. The Carolina Hurricanes wound up claiming him, so I don't think that's overly much of a surprise. Martin's been a really decent backup this year so far for the Jackets, and the Canes don't have a lot of help right now in the goaltending market. They have Yannick Perretz as their backup right now, with Antti Raanta, their starter, who they waived themselves a little while ago, because Kochetkov and Anderson, who are basically the team's future starter and the team's current starter, are both out due to injuries. So Martin's going to be a short-term solution. I think the Canes could still go after a goaltender. I'm not going to say Martin's going to be the only addition for the Carolina Hurricanes and the person who they go out to try and acquire to improve this team. I think there are other players out there who they would probably target, but for a short-term option, Martin's going to be a fantastic addition. He should be able to play as a decent 1B goaltender to Raanta and definitely be able to give them some solid starts. So it will be interesting to see, but I'm not really surprised Martin wound up being claimed by the Carolina Hurricanes. If not Carolina, I could have seen teams like Edmonton or Jersey possibly claim him as well. Like I said, it's a decent stopgap option, but with the Canes having a lot of injuries right now and Martin being a really cheap backup, I think the fit was just too obvious there for the Carolina Hurricanes. So it will be interesting to see. I'm not exactly sure if the Carolina Hurricanes are going to still acquire a goaltender, like I said, but still, for a short term, with Kochetkov and Anderson both out due to injuries, they can definitely use Martin as like a good solid third stringer. And when Kochetkov gets back off of injury reserve, maybe they send Martin back down on waivers. But for the time being, Martin's going to be a Carolina Hurricane, and he's going to help them as a tandem with Antti Raanta. So that's a really good waiver claim there from the Carolina Hurricanes to claim off Spencer Martin off of waivers, and hopefully he'll be able to help them as a backup. But those are two waiver updates. Duehr wound up clearing. A little bit surprised that happened. Thought he would have been claimed, but he's a really good bomb six forward, and he'll go to the minors of the Calgary Flames. And then Spencer Martin was placed on waivers by Columbus Blue Jackets. He did not clear. He went to the Carolina Hurricanes, and now he's going to be in a tandem with Antti Raanta. So those are two pretty good waiver updates over the past couple of days. Going over to a quick injury update for the past few days. If you look at some of the injury updates, Dylan Cozens has an upper body injury and is out day to day. Jeff Skinner's upper body injury is out day to day, as is Matthias Samuelsson, so some really bad injury updates there from the Buffalo Sabres. Blake Law has a lower body injury and is out week to week. Michael Amadio has an upper body injury and is out for an unknown period of time. Jared Spurgeon needs hip and I think shoulder surgery as well. He's going to be out for the rest of the season, so that's awful news for Minnesota Wild to lose one of their best defenders. Joel Edmondson has an undisclosed injury and is out for an unknown period of time. Marc-Andre Fleury has an upper body injury. Connor Duehr has a lower body injury, both are out for an unknown period of time. Henry Jokiharju is dealing with a soreness, and Eric Johnson has an upper body injury, both out for a day-to-day period of time. While Frederick Gaudreau from Minnesota and Martin Pospisil for the Calgary both have upper body injuries and out for no period of times. So really bad stuff there for the Flames and the Wild. But then we saw guys like Sean Couturier be cleared to play by Philly, Wedgwood be cleared to play by Dallas, Ovechkin be cleared to play by the Washington Capitals, Frederick by the Boston Bruins, Burakovsky by the Seattle Kraken, Fanti, who was on season opening injury reserve for the Edmonton Oilers, Couture for the Sharks, Sturm for the Sharks, and Natchez for the Canes. And good to see all those guys get back, either already back in the game action or should be able to get back in the game action and not just in the future. So those are your injury updates from the past couple of days. Really bad to see guys like Jokiharju, Johnson, Samuelson, and Skinner be out for the next little while for the Buffalo Sabres. Horrible to see Lozado week to week for the LA Kings, and Amadio out for the next little while for the Golden Knights, as well as Spurgeon be out for the season. So those are some pretty bad injury updates, but good to see guys like Ovechkin back for the Caps, Burakovsky back for the Kraken, Nate just back for the Carolina Hurricanes, and Chychrun being clear to play and hopefully be back in the not too distant future for the San Jose Sharks. So really good stuff there, and hopefully all those guys are really good in returning to game action. And the guys who are out right now are not going to be out for an overly long period of time. So hopefully that's going to be interesting. We also got suspension over the past couple of days. Yanni Gourde suffered a 2-game suspension for a boarding call on Mattias Ekholm. I thought it would have been maybe a fine or a 1-game suspension at the very least. I'm a little bit surprised it was 2 games. But Yanni Gourde is going to be suspended for the next little while. It was a pretty bad hit. Not a great hit. It was a hit up high. Ekholm, I think, stayed in the game. I don't think he's injured. So I think that sort of also played a role in it. But Gourde's going to miss the next couple of games due to suspension. So not overly great news to see Gourde go down with a suspension. He's a really good 6'4" for the Kraken. But they're going to miss him now for the next 2 games. So it's a really bad blow for the Seattle Kraken. And then going over here to a couple of trade rumors over the past couple of days. First was the Minnesota Wild on Elliot Friedman's recent 32 Thoughts podcast. He was talking about Marc-Andre Fleury. Now, I know we've talked about Fleury for a little while now. We talked about this in our last video, how Fleury might be a trade chip for the Wild if they do end up themselves being sellers. He said the exact same thing they were saying on Insider Trading a couple days ago. The Wild is still not giving up on their season, but if they do wind up being sellers, then Fleury's a guy who could definitely be moved. It's up to Fleury. He's got no movement clause. He calls the shots. But 2 teams that Elliot Friedman mentioned that could wind up being teams who wind up trading for Fleury, or at least have some interest that he thinks, would be Colorado and Carolina. Carolina, he says, could definitely use a starting goaltender. Like I said, I'm not sure if they would trust Ranta or Kochetkov as starters in a 7-game series if they were to make the playoffs. So maybe they go after a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury, have a Fleury-Kochetkov tandem for the last little bit of the season and sort of trying to run with that to carry themselves to the playoffs. For Colorado, it's a little bit more confusing, but I can definitely see why. Prosvetov has not been an overly great backup for the Colorado Avalanche. They originally went into the season with a Georgiev-Francouz tandem, but Francouz got injured. He's been out for the season. So Georgiev's been basically getting most of the starts, and given that fact, he sort of might be burning out Georgiev, so he might not have a lot left in the tank when it comes to playoff time. So getting a solid goaltender like Fleury could definitely help ease Georgiev off of the starts. Now, would Fleury upend Georgiev and be the playoff starter? I'm not exactly sure, and we did say that Fleury does sound like he wants to be a starter for a team if he was to go and be moved. So it sounds like that wouldn't make a whole bunch of sense for the Avalanche to acquire Fleury if they're not going to be placing him as a playoff starter. But it will be an interesting thing to watch out for. I do think there's a very likely possibility that Fleury could definitely be a very, very fantastic fit with the Colorado Avalanche, given the fact that they haven't had really a good 1B goaltender, and they could definitely use someone like a Fleury who would work extremely well in a tandem with Georgiev. So it will be interesting to see, but 2 teams that Fleury has been linked to now by Elliot Friedman is Colorado and Carolina. Both teams have been looking for a goaltender. Carolina could definitely be using a starter like a Fleury. Colorado more of a maybe 1B goaltender. I'm not sure if they would want to upend Georgiev to be their playoff starter, but still, both these teams need goaltending help. Fleury can be a huge addition for those 2 teams. So if the Wild are going to be sellers and they do wind up moving Fleury, keep your eye on the Avalanche and the Canes. Those 2 teams look to be teams who could wind up having some interest in Marc-Andre Fleury come trade deadline time. Next, going over to the Buffalo Sabres, Kevin Weeks was talking about some of the trade chips that he thinks that could definitely be in play going over to the trade deadline. One of the names he mentioned, which was a little bit surprising in my opinion, was Casey Mittelstadt. Mittelstadt has been a fantastic player for the Buffalo Sabres. He's their points leader this year. He's been absolutely phenomenal. He's definitely started to gain steam after last year. He had a really good season last year, starting to have a breakout season this year. It's taken a while. He was a 2017 top 10 pick, so it took a while for him to start to get his feet. He did suffer a couple of injuries throughout early part of his career, but still, he's definitely starting to find his footing, and he's been an absolutely phenomenal player for the Buffalo Sabres. But Kevin Weeks did discuss the fact that the Sabres have got a lot of their core locked up long term. That's Dahlin, Power, Samuelson, Cozens, Thompson, Tuck signed for the next couple of years, same with Skinner. Some of these other younger guys are going to be signed in the not too distant future. He stressed the fact that Mittelstadt has not been signed yet. He's in the final year of a 3-year, $2.5 million AAV deal. I think he's an RFA with ARB rates this year, if I'm correct. So he's going to be an interesting name to watch out for, maybe not even just for the regular season, but for the offseason as well. There's been a lot of talk that I've seen that maybe the Sabres can't keep Mittelstadt. There's a possibility that I've heard that the Sabres may not be able to afford what he wants to be making on a new contract. So Now, is it possible he could see Mittlestadt be moved? I think it's possible. I also think it's possible he stays. I could see them trying to convince him to stay on like a 5 or 6 year deal, like $5 or $6 million, to be sort of like their second or third line center or a top 6 forward. I could definitely see that happening for Casey Mittlestadt. He's a very fantastic player. He's been extremely well with Buffalo. I think they really do like him. So it will be an interesting situation to watch out for, but it's interesting to note that Mittlestadt's name is out there currently at this point in time. I could see a Sabres move him. One, if they were to move him, they would have to have an extremely good trade package in return. And two, they have to be confident that they can't really sign him to a long-term extension if they were to move him. If they can sign to a long-term extension, you gotta do that instead of moving him. He's been a fantastic fit for the Buffalo Sabres. So instead of moving him, definitely try and sign him first, but it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. I definitely do see why the Sabres could possibly move him, and I could see teams who need center help definitely look to add a guy like Casey Mittlestadt, who's not going to only help for this year, but could also help for the future too. But definitely, it seems like Buffalo, I think, would rather keep him, but if they aren't able to come together in a long-term extension, and it doesn't sound like that would work, then I would definitely think that Mittlestadt could be a possible trade candidate for the Buffalo Sabres, either before a deadline or possibly in the offseason. So that's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. Then going over to Nashville Predators, on Insider Trading video on TSN a couple of days ago, we heard Pierre LeBrun state that the fact that UC Saros could be a guy who's also out there. He says that throughout the past, the goal for the Predators have been to sign UC Saros, but he said with the vast amount of teams looking for starting level goaltending help, he says that they're definitely going to be listening on Saros, and if the right trade package comes, he could wind up getting dealt. Saros has this year plus next year, I think a $4 million cap hit or a $5 million cap hit. It was a really good cheap cap hit for what he brings. He's one of the top 10 or 5 goaltenders in the league. He's a very elite level goaltender. He's a very fantastic goaltender. Now, the Preds do have a great young prospect in Yaroslav Askarov in the minors, who's their future starter. They could wind up selling Saros and still have a solid goaltender in Askarov. So it's going to be interesting to see if they do wind up moving him. I think Askarov is a really, really good prospect and allows them to possibly consider Saros move. Now, there would have to be a really, really good trade offer. Pierre LeBrun said that maybe a couple of first-round picks wouldn't even cut it. He says if you could incorporate a guy like a Quinton Byfield from LA, just he was throwing out LA as a possible option. He said if LA were to acquire him, they would probably have to include a guy like Quinton Byfield as a possible trade option. So it would have to be a massive deal in order for Saros to get moved by the Nashville Predators. And it would definitely be an astoundingly huge asking price. But if there was a team out there who was desperate enough to try and acquire an elite-level goaltender who signed for not only this year, but next year too, there may be a team out there who is willing to pay the price to acquire Saros. So we can't disclose the fact that the Preds still want to keep Saros. Their main goal is still to try and keep him in their system long term and keep it like a Saros Askarov tandem over the next little while. But it also seems like the fact that with the amount of goaltenders that are out in the market right now and that could definitely be willing to acquire a guy like a starter like a Saros, it sounds like there's a possibility that Saros could get moved, and we're going to have to watch out for that situation. I think there's a very likely chance Saros gets moved. I'm not saying it's a guarantee. I think they still like to keep Saros and extend him as early as they can, but if there's a right deal that comes along that really intrigues Nashville, it sounds like they would do it. So it's an interesting situation, and we're going to have to watch out for that one. Going on to the Ottawa Senators, we're talking about Jacob Chychrun again. This has come up not only on Kevin Weeks when he was discussing some of his trade chips that he thinks could be moved by a deadline, but also on Insider Trading, and both really stated the same thing. They both said that the Sens have a plethora of blue liners. They have a really good crop of defenders. They have Chabot, Sanderson, and Chychrun on the left side. Some Barrisman and Richards on the left side of their defense. Now, the Chabot signed for this year plus 4 more seasons at $8 million. Sanderson's about to start an 8-year, $8 million extension next offseason. So they're both signed to longer-term contracts at over $8 million. And a lot of people do think that that's possibly why they would not want to move either one of those two in Chabot or Sanderson. So if they don't want to move either of those two guys, and Chychrun only has this year plus next year a $4.6 million cap hit, there's a possibility they could try and move Chychrun as moving from a position of strength. We know that the Senators season has gone off the rails. They need to incorporate some changes. Maybe Chychrun's the change. Chychrun's though been fantastic for the Senators. He's been scoring a lot of goals this year. He's been extremely well as an offensive defenseman on that blue line. I could see him try and keep him and extend him. I'll definitely think that they would want to try and keep him, just given the fact that he's got connections to Ottawa. It seemed like he wanted to play there last year. I'm not exactly sure if he still wants to sign a long-term extension, but that's another thing we have to watch out for here. Chychrun could wind up not wanting to extend in Ottawa, and if that's the case, they'll probably want to move him by the deadline or in the offseason, given the fact he'll still have this year plus next year at $4.6 million capital, or in the offseason, one more year at $4.6 million, and they would avoid having to lose him as a free agent, and could definitely get more of a return than they could at next year's trade deadline, because you would only have the 1 year left. So it will be interesting to see if Chychrun gets moved. Teams who could definitely definitely see have some interest in him would be 5 Western teams, who some were linked to him last year and some could definitely use some more upgrades. Edmonton will be one of them, LA would be another, so Winnipeg, St. Louis, and Dallas. And if those 5 are the teams who are looking to try and acquire him, if I'm the Ottawa Senators, I'm asking for a really good prospect. If I'm looking at the Edmonton Oilers, I'm probably looking at a guy like Raphael Lavoie or Carter Savoy or Xavier Bourgault or someone like that. If you're looking at the Stars, you're looking at a guy like Maverick Bourque. See if you can get Logan Stankoven, or maybe Antonio Stranges, or maybe Artem Grushinkov, or something like that. If you look at the Jets, I'm looking at a guy like Ville Heinola, or Logan Stanley, or maybe a younger guy like a Chaz Lucius. Those could be some Senators could target from the Jets. The Kings, you could look at a guy like Jordan Spence, Jacob Mouvrer, maybe one of the young forward prospects like Thomas Turcotte Madden, something like that. I could definitely see the Sens have interest in something like that. If you're looking at the Blues, maybe look at a guy like Jake Neighbors, maybe Bolduc, Zach Dean, something like that. Maybe Tyler Tucker or Scott Peronovich. So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't see that it's a guarantee that all the Senators move him, but according to some reports, it sounds like they have a plethora of defensemen on the left side of their blue line. Siobhan Sanderson are both signed for a longer term period of time. It may make more sense to trade Chychrun. And with him having this year plus next year $4.6 million and still some uncertainty about if he would want to resign on a new contract, there may make it a little bit more sense as to why they'll possibly be willing to move Chychrun. But he's going to be anywhere after the show for Chychrun's a really good, fantastic offensive top 4 defenseman, and he will be a fantastic addition to any team's blue lines. But those are some of the teams I think we'll have to watch out for. Like I said, not guaranteed Chychrun gets moved, but if he does, those could be some teams I could see him go for, and the Sens would have to get a huge return if they were to move Chychrun. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. And lastly, here going over to the Calgary Flames. On the entire video on TSN, talking about the Calgary Flames, Darren Dreger did say that there was a very likely chance that after the Calgary Flames resurgence, winning 4 in a row before they lose to Toronto over the past couple of days, there's a very likely chance that the Calgary Flames could wind up waiting a little bit longer to deal some of their pending UFAs. Now, he says that Hanifin is one of the guys who could wind up staying in Calgary, and there still seems to be some possibility about him signing an extension. So with all that in mind, it sounds like if they can continue to win, I think they said they have like 4 or 5 games left before the All-Star break. So he said that if they continue to do really well leading up to the All-Star break, and they're still in a playoff hunt and they're not too far out of a playoff spot come the All-Star break, then they may wait a little bit longer and may consider moving some of their pending UFAs closer to the deadline. But he said if they start to fall off a little bit and have a little bit of falling out over the next little while, and they continue to falter a little bit, get back down to around 500 and are still out of a playoff spot, then he said that the Flames could wind up being a team who ends up making some of the first trades of the deadline. Like we said, Lindholm, Hanifin, Tanev, all 3 are pending UFAs. He says that they could definitely look to try and move some of those guys earlier than they would if they would continue to win. And if they are a little bit farther out by the All-Star break, then just after the All-Star break, they may consider start to moving some pieces. So it is going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. Like I said, the Flames are a really, really good team right now. They've sort of turned things around. They still, I don't see making the playoffs. I think they had too bad of a start to make the playoffs, and they don't have enough pieces there to sort of rectify it like the Edmonton Oilers have. But still, I think they are a decent team, but I could definitely see what Darren Dreger says come to fruition. If they continue to lose over the next little while, like they did to Toronto, and they lose a couple of more games, then they go like, I think they have 4 games left, they go 1-3-0 in the last 4 games, and they start to fall a little bit farther out of a playoff race. By the All-Star break, I could definitely see them in the first week or 2 of February wind up dealing some of these guys, but if they are able to keep pace a little bit, and keep pace for a playoff spot, and win a couple of games before the All-Star break, maybe they do try and wait closer till the deadline to make some of these moves. And speaking of the Calgary Flames about players who they can move, 2 players have been linked to 2 teams so past a while. Hanifin has been linked to Arizona again. It seems like they still want to try and acquire Hanifin via a sign and trade. We know the Coyotes are not at the point yet where they would be willing to give everything for pending UFAs, but if they could get someone who could help their team long term, I think they would definitely do it. They have the cap space to sign Hanifin to whatever deal he wants. They could definitely work out a sign and trade. They have the assets to definitely give Calgary what they want, so it will be an interesting situation to watch out for. But definitely do think there's a very likely possibility that the Flames and the Coyotes could wind up hooking up on a deal. Hanifin's been linked to Arizona for a long period of time. I would think there's a very likely chance that Hanifin could wind up going to Arizona. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, and we know we've heard some people say that he only wants to possibly sign in Boston, so that'll be a huge interest because I don't think Arizona's acquiring him if he's just a UFA. but it will be an interesting situation to watch out for. Does Hanifin wind up going to Arizona? Another team who I could see looking at Elias Lindholm, who's been linked to him over the past little while, is the Vancouver Canucks. Apparently he's been linked by a couple of sources to the Vancouver Canucks. Lindholm's a really good second line center who could definitely help the Vancouver Canucks team. On top of that, I really do think that he would be a fantastic addition for the Vancouver Canucks. We already seen the Calgary Flames and the Canucks hook up on a deal around Zadorov, so I could see these two teams hook up on another deal. Would it be interesting? It would definitely be interesting. He would be a fantastic top six addition. Solid second line center behind Pettersson. A lot of people said it would probably be a rental situation. The Canucks do have a couple of decent assets they could definitely part with if they were willing to acquire a guy like Elias Lindholm, so it's going to be interesting to see, but it's definitely going to be a really interesting situation to watch out for. Could Lindholm be a possible trade candidate for the Vancouver Canucks? It does seem like it's very likely. So Lindholm's willing to the Canucks, Hanfin's willing to the Coyotes, and it seems like, according to a couple of reports, if the Flames are doing really good up until the All-Star break, they may wait until closer to the deadline to make some moves, but if they continue to falter a little bit, then expect them to make some moves just after the All-Star break. So that's some of the interesting trade rumors over the past couple days. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk about for today. What do you think about the Flames? Do they wind up making moves closer to the deadline or just in the first couple of weeks of February? And if so, who do you think they move? Could Lindholm be going to Vancouver? Hanifin going to Arizona? Definitely love to hear your thoughts on that. Do you see Chychrun being moved by Ottawa Senators? They have a plethora of good left shot defensemen. They have a couple of longer term deals. It might make more sense for them to trade Chychrun if they can get a really good package. Could teams like Edmonton, LA, Winnipeg, Dallas, St. Louis be of interest to Chychrun? I'd definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts on it if you think those teams could definitely have some interest in Chychrun. Do you see Saros be moved by Nashville? It's not guaranteed by any means. I think they would still rather keep him, but if they were to try and consider a trade, I could definitely see some teams have interest in him. Saros is a fantastic elite level goaltender, so it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. Do you see Fleury being dealt by the Minnesota Wild to a team like the Colorado Avalanche or the Carolina Hurricanes? I think it's definitely a possibility. Colorado's been a really good team, but they could definitely use a solid 1B goaltender. Carolina could definitely use a solid playoff starter. I think both of those teams could definitely use a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury, so it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. Do you see Mittlestadt being moved by Buffalo Sabres? I think it's a possibility, just given the fact that they have a lot of good young players in long-term deals. They have a lot of guys coming up. There might not be a spot for Mittlestadt long-term, but if they do want to sign Mittlestadt long-term, there will have to be some conversations about what Mittlestadt wants on a long-term deal, because I think they could definitely sign Mittlestadt to a long-term deal, but they would also have to consider possibly moving him if he's not going to be signing on a long-term deal by a deadline or in the offseason. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for, but I could definitely see Mittlestadt possibly get moved. But it's have to be a huge ask for the way things have gone this year. And then what do you think of the Gourde suspension, injury updates, waiver updates, and 2 signings we had today? Definitely love to hear your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk about for today. And to like this video, and if you'd like to subscribe down below, thank you for all your support. I've never been able to do it without you guys. So if you to subscribe, I also have a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So let me check that out. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.